This is Mr. E with another Bearded Music Teacher podcast. This episode centers around just a brief overview of the Rolling Stones. I am here actually in my classroom, which is awesome. I love being in my classroom recording these things. And these podcasts are just for educational purposes. This just gives you the quick down and dirty, I guess you could say, that I tell my students of what you need to know in my class. This by no means is all the information of the Rolling Stones or the previous episodes, like the Beatles that I just got done doing and things like that. So this by no means is all the information, and it certainly is a jumping point. And throughout my classroom, what I'll do is I'll do these little activities where the students will go off and do stuff on their own. So these are for educational purposes. Please make sure you follow me on Twitter, which is at MR_E_F music FCS. It's also in the description of this episode. If you're catching this on YouTube, you'll see the video or the slides. If you are on audio, if you're a student of mine, you have access to these slide decks that I've created. If not, I encourage you to do some research. If you're not one of my students, encourage you to do some research on these people, because we are starting to get to the big. This one's a big cornerstone of rock music, particularly what I call blues rock. So, the Rolling Stones, they drew on influences of the 1950s Chicago electric blues tradition, featuring slide guitar, harmonica, and a style of vocal delivery that was really along the lines of Muddy Waters, which we'll get to, and there's a connection with the Rolling Stones, with them. Elmore James and Little Walter, if I remember correctly, those are the big ones that kind of influenced these bands, particularly today's focus, the Rolling Stones. And this revived the blues scene in the UK that had flourished during the early 1960s and gained popularity in the United States, rather, after the Beatles broke into the American markets. So remember, the Beatles ended up breaking through to the United States with mainly their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show and the release of, if I remember right, I Want to Hold Your Hand. So I could be wrong. Go ahead and look back at the Beatles Part 2, that very two-part overview of the Beatles. And keep in mind, this one and the Beatles are very, very brief summaries of what they have. So you have things like the Animals, who's another blues band that we're going to talk about later on. And that's fronted by Eric Burdon, which is a very powerful blues guy. And what came out of these blues scenes in the UK were things like John Mayall, Steve Winwood, which is an amazing guitarist. You have Eric Clapton, which is absolutely amazing as well, and had a very good run with his band, I believe the Yardbirds, for a little while. Then he went on his solo career and had a huge run as Eric Clapton. Then you had Jack Bruce and John McLaughlin as well. So this isn't just the Rolling Stones aren't just the only ones. There's plenty of different documentaries that go through how Brian Jones kind of forms the Beatles. So the Rolling Stones tended to focus on Jagger and Richards, meaning Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. But it was really led by Brian Jones, who he himself was a very big, talented musician in the blues and in jazz. This guy was incredibly talented while he was with us on this earth, and he was very, very dedicated to American blues specifically. So there is a story of not Chuck Berry, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, they share, where they did go to school at one point. They knew each other, and it had been a while, and they kind of went their separate ways. And they found each other on a train platform in England or in the UK. And I can't remember who had it. One of them had albums tucked under their arm, and I think it was some blues record. I think I want to say Muddy Waters. And uh, one of them, I think it was Keith. I think it was Keith Richards, came up to Mick and goes, "Hey, where'd you get those records, man?" And they immediately hit it off with rekindling their relationship as blues fans. So the group got its start in July of '62 with the filling in for the Blues Incorporated at the Marquee, and then they started playing the Ailing Club, and by '63, January '63, you start to see the beginnings of the formation of the band. So you have Mick Jagger on vocals, you have Keith Richards on guitar, you had Brian Jones always on guitar, then you have Bill Wyman who jumps in on bass, and the famous and recently passed Charlie Watts. They join, and then you even have Ian Stewart. A lot of people kind of cast over him, just kind of go, whatever. But you also have Ian Stewart, who is a very talented pianist in his own right. So they turned to more mainstream pop orientation. This was smart for their group because they started to see how they could be not marketed as the Beatles, but more along lines of like the blues Beatles. Some people will be like, "Oh, no." Well, yeah, that's kind of what they are. And they really started being marketed as the anti-Beatle, the bad boys of the Beatles. The Beatles at the time were the clean cut mop tops. We hadn't got to the point where we have like an Abbey Road, kind of like the scruffy, almost not hippie like, but very scruffy, not mop top kind of thing. So the Stones were known for that, the kind of bad boy, whatever kind of image. Well, they signed for, they recorded for Decca and were signed by a guy by the name of Dick Rowe. And he was the guy who famously, in a lot of, I guess you could say, folklore. We know that this is not exactly true, but he is kind of labeled as the guy who turned down the Beatles. There's some other things with the Beatles and the tapes with the Beatles and things like that, and I encourage you to go and look at them. Actually, John Kovach of University of Rochester does a great job with covering the Beatles. He's outstanding with it. So before they signed, Rowe was judging a talent contest in Liverpool, and the panel included was was George Harrison, and George Harrison was there, and those two were kind of talking, and Harrison actually enthusiastically endorsed the Stones. You have to realize that the market was like, oh, it's the Beatles, good boys, Rolling Stones, bad boys. But really, Harrison had a lot of admiration toward these guys. He really thought that they were really, really good, and Rowe really took the advice of George Harrison and signed him. So initially, the Stones didn't write any of their own songs. They actually did a lot of covers, and two of them that stand out, and we look at these in class, is Chuck Berry's "Come On," which again is that kind of blues oriented. If you look at Chuck Berry's music, especially "Come On," that's very blues oriented. Then we have Buddy Holly's "Not Fade Away." And then "The Last Time" was one of many Jagger and Richard hits that they pulled out, and that was in '65 as the pop charts number 9 slot. So we actually go through and we look at it, the different songs. We look at the different cover songs in the class. So if you haven't, I would encourage you to go and check out the Stones, their first album. The name of the album escapes me right now, but it's "Come On, Not Fade Away." You can probably find these on YouTube, actually. And then "The Last Time" is another one that I pull out because they're all very similar. And they kind of stay really stylistically the same up until the Majesties album, really. So now we look at Angie also was one that hit in late of '65, and they go on and enjoy a lot more popularity with that. It's actually a song, if I remember correctly, about a girl that they had to like change the words to or something. So let me quick advance my slides here. Again, this is, come on, no, there we go. No, there we go. So in 1965, this is where they really make a stamp on everything. '65 is really where we start to see the Beatles kind of falling apart. Well, the peak of Beatlemania. Then in 66, 67, we start to see the Beatles kind of go more avant-garde, at least in my opinion. So the Stones actually, at the same time that Beatlemania was kind of going through, they build up in the UK. They had not seen success as the Beatles had in '63 and '64 at the height of the Beatlemania. Gary and the Pacemaker and the Dave Clark Five were actually more warmly received at that time. So again, the Stones kind of get this off to the side kind of thing, but they really rode the fame of the antithesis or anti Beatle, sporting a scruffier look, like I said before, the attitudes, the rebellious nature, like yeah, whatever, and doing stuff that they maybe shouldn't have been doing. There are a lot of legal issues that later on got popped up that kind of added to their reputation. But this was key because then you had specifically you were either a Beatle fan or a Stones fan, and the Stones really solidified their image as the bad boys of rock with "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" or just "Satisfaction," which was a fuzz-driven kind of sound. So if you don't know what a fuzz pedal is, it's a pedal for a guitar that kind of adds this, not a distortion, but it adds very much a kind of crackle, more of a fuzz, more of a crackle sound. Not a, I wouldn't call it a distortion, even though I could probably put it in the same category as a distortion. But anyways, the fuzz pedal is very unique, and I think the Yardbirds actually do a really good job of having that as well. But they really hit it, and Satisfaction was along the lines of a person who cannot get what they want from everything in life, that things just don't excite them anymore, and so that really hits it. We also have follow-up hits of "Get Off My Cloud," which topped #1 in the pop and the UK in '65. "As Tears Go By," which is #6 in the pops, which is in 1966. 19th Nervous Breakdown, which hit second in the pop charts and second in the UK charts in '66, and "Paint It Black." I actually go over these particular songs: "Get Off My Cloud," "As Tears Go By," 19th Nervous Breakdown, and "Paint It Black." A lot of my students hear "Paint It Black" and they're like, "Oh, it's that song from the Guitar Hero." Yes. And we talk about how the sitar plays into it and things like that. Unfortunately, because of the rebellious nature, it also carried over, and their rebellious image, I should say, it also carried over to the fans. The fans took it and ran with it and actually caused a lot of fan riots and police intervention. This is well documented in tons of biographies about the Beatles and autobiographies where their sets would get shut down, not midway through, but pretty well through everything due to riots. There were some where I think a handful of performances, if not more, were shut down even before the Stones took the stage because people were so violent, I guess you could say. Now, Richards and Jagger really took their originals tend to be more Chuck Berry and Motown than Muddy Waters or Howlin' Wolf. They're more pop oriented, but they definitely take advantage of the 12-bar blues, which is very good about that. While the Beatles employed, though, that ABA form of the Brill building, that more craftsman work, they more try to stick to the Mick and Keith really stick to the forms that Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry do. Those are the two big ones. And it's interesting because Keith Richards actually has a run-in with Chuck Berry. So this has been documented on a late-night TV show where Keith was talking about how they were backstage one time, and Chuck Berry left his guitar laying out backstage, and Keith idolized Chuck Berry. Just absolutely loved him. In fact, they actually are on a film where they jammed together. It's a really great film to watch, especially those two go back and forth. You can definitely tell it's a hero looking up to, or somebody looking up to their hero. It's very like that. And they have a lot of respect for each other. But according to Keith Richards, he comes up and he goes, "Ooh, look at that guitar. Let me touch that guitar." And he's sitting there playing around with it. Chuck Berry comes backstage and it's like, "What are you doing with my guitar?" and pops him right in the face. So there's definitely that love lost a little bit. There was a little bit of animosity, like, "Why are you touching my guitar?" But they definitely had a lot of respect for each other. But again, this is just a very brief overview of the Stones. This by no means is the end all be all. After 1966, they go on to do things in the psychedelic realm with the Majesties, Four Satanic Majesties, if I remember correctly. They still are recording, and well, they were recently up until the COVID-19 pandemic. They were still active. They're still performing when they can. At least I'm not sure about when Charlie Watts recently passed away, what their status is of it, but they definitely are ones that keep on performing, keep on trying to be in there in the mainstream. And if you haven't seen it, they have replaced the guitar, the bass player, and I think they added a guitar player. But it definitely is something to look at if you want more blues oriented stuff. Again, the Rolling Stones have just some great 12-bar blues, but more in a rock kind of feel. Similar to, you could say that they're not quite ZZ Top, but they definitely have some similarities to the great ZZ Top with their song structures and how they organize their chordal structures. But anyways, before I get too off topic in a side tangent there, that is all for today. Please make sure you check me out on the previous episodes. Please make sure you share this podcast with people. I just want to get the word out about things, get information out. And again, this is not an exhaustive podcast about them. We could go on for hours about the Beatles, the Stones, Gary and the Pacemaker, Dave Clark 5, and all these bands and the Yardbirds. Oh my gosh. Sorry, that was the bell in my school. But that is something that we could go on for hours and hours and on. But anyways, we'll see you next time. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at MR_E_musicFCS, and I look forward to hearing from you. Please share this again and enjoy your time with these podcasts and enjoy your day. Have a great one.